Hello, everyone. Welcome to this milestone event. As the participants are joining, I will just say a few words before we start with the agenda. My name is Natalia, and I'm head of programs at the Joint SDG Fund, where, among others, I manage the global portfolio on integrated policy with 35 joint programs on social protection. Today is the launch of the paper titled UN Collaboration on Social Protection, Reaching Consensus on How to Accelerate Social Protection System Building. It is the result of a collaborative effort led by ILO, FAO, and UNICEF with the main goals to capture progress, review developments, showcase innovation, consolidate lessons learned, and most importantly, identify pathways forward. All of this regarding UN collaboration and global, regional, and country level on social protection. The link with the paper will be posted in the chat. The core part of the event will be the presentation of the paper and a roundtable panel, followed by open discussion. Please use the chat to post comments, but then use Q&A to ask specific questions. Also, do not hesitate to engage on social media to amplify this discussion. You can use the hashtag from the opening slide. First and foremost, I would like to invite Helena Fraser, Director at the Policy and Program Branch of the UN Development Coordination Office, to set the context for the overall event. I should also mention that before DCO, Helena served as the UN Resident Coordinator in Uzbekistan, where she led development and implementation of an excellent joint program on social protection and leaving no one behind. Helena, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Nenad. And on behalf of Assistant Secretary General Robert Piper, who unfortunately is unable to be here today, I'm very happy to join you for the launch of this paper on UN collaboration in social protection, and warm appreciation on behalf of the Development Coordination Office to the Joint SDG Fund, FAO, ILO, and UNICEF, and of course, congratulations. So the effort to galvanize the UN system's work on social protection was catalyzed by the financial crisis 13 years ago. And this resulted in the Social Protection Floor Initiative, which was launched in response to the kind of significant economic and financial challenges and the importance that highlighted of social protection. 13 years on, in fact, I guess 11 years on, the pandemic has again highlighted the crucial role that social protection can play and must play in national responses around the world. For millions of people, social protection has ensured access to healthcare, helped ensure safeguarding of livelihoods, and helped to stabilize businesses and economies. Without the massive and rapid expansion of social protection, the socioeconomic consequences of COVID-19 would certainly have been much worse. But COVID-19 also revealed once again the large gaps in coverage, in adequacy, and in comprehensiveness of social protection. Some 4 billion people around the world have enjoyed no social protection at all throughout this tumultuous 2 years. And this has highlighted once again to the UN system the importance of building robust and universal social protection systems for all. It's highlighted that we must support countries to be better prepared and to help their populations with everyday life cycle challenges and to contend with future crises, which will inevitably come and hit potentially with more force, such as the combined impact of climate shock and related challenges around the world. Now, during these past 13 years, we've also seen how different UN entities have exponentially lifted their game on social protection, recognized its importance as an investment, and really tried to support work on social protection strategies, mandates, increasingly dedicated to working together at the country level. This period has shown us that with a proliferation of actors in this space, the importance of coordination and collaboration shines through ever more clearly. This includes developing common language, common advocacy messages, ensuring that collectively we give clear and coherent advice and support to host governments, and ensuring that we come across as indeed one UN to have greater influence and be more than the sum of our respective parts. And of course, because social protection can act as a multiplier across Agenda 2030 and really amplify acceleration across multiple SDGs, it's also become an important convergence point for UN country teams to come together, and of course for the resident coordinator system to support that effort. As our director, Robert Piper, mentioned in his address to the first workshop for today's publication, social protection needs to be part of the everyday vocabulary for all resident coordinators, and they must be highly literate in social protection issues. Now, as a former resident coordinator myself, I have to say this call to action was given tremendous momentum by the Joint SDG Fund's investment in social protection starting in 2020. To date, the fund has dispersed $69 million with enormous appreciation to our donors, with 30 million leveraged in co-funding for 35 programs where the UN is collaborating on integrated social protection over 2 years between 2020 and 2022. Additionally, the 25 programs of the Joint SDG Fund focusing on integrated national financing framework has also significantly helped to accelerate and shine a light on our work in social protection. And this year, we're launching 8 programs on social protection in small island developing states, also with thanks and investment to the Joint SDG Fund. In my previous incarnation as resident coordinator in Uzbekistan, I witnessed firsthand how potent the combination of collaborative, truly integrated UN joint programs and catalytic seed funding from the fund can be, particularly in this critical area where otherwise UN policy advice would be unlikely to receive the resources required to land, and where also the absence of incentive to really collaborate might lead to fragmented advice in a challenging situation. Indeed, in Uzbekistan, the social protection system was inherited from the Soviet era. It was highly fragmented at institutional and policy levels. Welfare programs did not reach vulnerable groups, leading to social exclusion, marginalization, and inequality. Only 1 of 3 people living in poverty received some social benefits. Through the program, and specifically through the really excellent collaboration between ILO, UNICEF, and UNDP, a flagship single registry of social protection was piloted and eventually spread out nationwide. It helped to remove administrative barriers, provide clear eligibility criteria, simplify payment processes. And it resulted in a 5-fold increase in the number of submitted applications, and the overall coverage of vulnerable populations went from 600,000 to 1.2 million just in the initial phase. A full-fledged costed national strategy for social protection was adopted, and a special focus on reaching people living with disabilities ensured a special emphasis on reaching the furthest behind first. So that's one of the reasons why today's publication is very, very important from a personal perspective as well, because it documents the important development in UN collaboration on social protection and provides a common road and common principles, drawing on good practice so that we can work as one even better. The launch is also rather serendipitous, given the launch very recently of the Secretary General's Global Accelerator, which will focus on creating more jobs and extending social protection to all. From DCO's perspective, we also believe that this publication contains really important replicable lessons on how the UN system can collaborate better in other sectors. Today, we're facing a significant global economic shock, debt distress, and intersecting compounding crisis that is having a terrible impact on people around the world living in poverty. Many countries are facing a large financing gap in social protection. Low-income countries alone require an additional 78 billion a year to ensure a minimum level of social protection. So measures to close financing gaps and expand fiscal space are absolutely critical. This would generate more resources for social protection. And today we must really acknowledge and appreciate the absolutely clear imperative to work very closely with the international financial institutions and especially the IMF to help to secure and generate the fiscal space in line with our ambition for social protection for all. Now, ultimately, I just want to close by saying thank you for all joining today. It's really great to see so many agencies here participating, collaborating, taking time to reflect, taking time to see how they can maximize their impact together. From DCO's perspective, this publication really helps bring us together, bring us forward in the effort for collaboration. It highlights the relevance of the UN development system reform and helps take us one step forward to the essential goal of universal social protection for all, in line with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Thank you all very much, and looking forward to a very interactive and lively hour and a half. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Helena. Thank you for providing a very rich description of the context. Now we move to the presentation of the paper, which will be done by three lead agencies. David Stewart, Chief of Child Poverty and Social Protection at UNICEF, will present the overall rationale. Alejandro Greenspoon, Senior Economist in the Social Protection, Economic and Social Development stream at FAO, will address the priorities or the what of the paper. And Valerie Schmidt, Deputy Director of ILO Social Protection Department, will present provisional recommendations or the how of the paper. Colleagues, the floor is yours for next 15 minutes. Thank you.
Ned, thank you so much. I think I'm going to get started with the discussion on the rationale. So if we could just move maybe a couple of slides forward. And yeah, perfect. Well, this one. Helena already gave a really great sense of why this issue is so important. Yeah, and so I just want to touch on a few additional points. I think the first place to start that we want to start is really just to acknowledge that we've come a long way in this work. Many of you will remember in 2009, the Chief Executive Board launched the UN Social Protection Floor Initiative. And since then, we've really become a sector that's become more engaged, more collaborative, and really increase the amount of work that we're doing together. And we see that in common definitions and guidance that we've been putting together, concrete country results. And you can see here, I won't go into the details, but a smattering of different work going on in countries. And also regional and global results, including the Social Protection Floors recommendation, the creation of SPF-I, the interagency group, the focus of social protection in Agenda 2030, USP 2030, and a range of different issues. And among the many strengths I think there are in this paper, you can really get a really strong view of the history of how our work has evolved, as well as an incredible range of country examples of work that we're doing together. So I really recommend looking at it with those issues in mind. If we could move to the next slide. And I think really what we want to do is with this paper is build on our accomplishments, but also acknowledging our limitations. And I think that we see with some clarity through this paper both of these issues. So sort of on the accomplishment side, we really have seen an increase in global coherence and increased joint work on social protection over the last 10 years. There's also been a real strength and consensus on the goal of universal social protection. This is now something which is sort of been normalized, and we really share a vision and a focus on that. As Helena mentioned, the profile and the value of social protection has really moved far up the global agenda. And I think I'd also say, and I hope this is shared by others, that there is, of course, institutional competition, and this is something this paper is looking to improve, but really it's a very collaborative sector. And when I talk to colleagues who work in different sectors, I do get the sense of a strong collaboration and sort of familial feeling among those of us working in social protection, which is a very, very strong foundation. And also there's a great deal of country work ongoing. So mention here the 35 countries working on the joint SDG fund on social protection, but of course, there are indeed many more than that. So many accomplishments, but also limitations. So this issue of territoriality, sharp elbows. Our colleague Ian Orton gave me this analogy which stuck in my head of porcupines in a cage. Porcupines are social animals. They want to be together. They need to be together. But at the same time, if they get too close, they can literally prick each other with their spines. And there's a good analogy there with the UN. We need to work together, but sometimes when we get too close, things can get tricky. We see a disconnect sometimes between headquarters and the field. This is across different UN agencies. And the reality in a number of countries is that we can give mixed messages to governments. We're not always aligned and moving together as one, as well as a challenge and failure in addressing certain key issues that need to be addressed, such as inequality. Concerns also that international standards can be too far removed from country realities, and also that still there can be this challenge that we can represent our agencies before the UN as a whole, and that's really a way of framing the challenge that we face. If we could move to the next slide. So we really face in this moment a great opportunity and some significant challenges that need to be overcome. And this is the context in which this paper sits. So first of all, COVID-19 has really elevated the recognition of the crucial importance of social protection. And has opened a policy window for really increasing social protection as the importance of its and its recognition has grown. And there's really a renewed impetus for the UN to create greater work together through the social protection, the focus on social protection, the global accelerator. So the moment is to take advantage of this policy window is very much here. But we also face some challenges. One concern is that crises like COVID-19 can pigeonhole social protection as a sort of fire engine, emergency response. And of course, it's about addressing life cycle risks as well as the big covariate shocks that can come. But also we face an uncertain moment in terms of the fiscal retrenchment that we know is coming and already starting to happen as governments in response to the stimulus that happened through COVID may be retrenching. And that's something that we really are going to have to face. If we go to the next slide. And we really now have an urgent need to accelerate. There's no doubt about that. And Helena also touched on this very, very clearly. Very significant gaps in terms of social protection coverage, significant financing gaps. We know that shocks are going to continue to grow. So we really have a significant challenge ahead of us. And the need for the need for increased joint UN work on particular issues becomes very clear on social protection systems, on universal coverage, on comprehensiveness and adequacy, sustainable funding, and the need for key principles around our work on social protection. If we just move to the final slide. So finally, to the objectives of this review exercise. So we find ourselves at this critical juncture with a unique policy window, but with significant challenges ahead. And the aim here really is to enhance one UN collaboration towards socioeconomic recovery and achieving the SDGs and building readiness for the future shocks that are going to come. The document seeks to summarize and assess the results of 13 years of joint work on social protection, but then to look forward. And these last two pieces maybe I may have put backwards. So the first is really to identify what the priorities of joint action should be, and then how can we move forward? How can we coordinate and collaborate better and deliver in a way which is greater than the sum of our parts, exactly as Helena phrased it. So this is what we hope to do with this paper. And with that, let me pass to my colleagues, first Alejandro and then Valerie, to look first at the what and then at the how. Alejandro, over to you.
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon. So let me start with the what. What should be the priorities for joint action? We identified 6 areas where the UN can and should engage as one in supporting countries to accelerate progress towards universal social protection. Consensus around these areas was reached through an iterative process of consultation over this past year, representing priorities around which we can all find common ground. The first one is about working together towards the progressive realization of the right to social protection so that no one is left behind. We have all seen how the pandemic has revealed large protection gaps that especially affect those in the informal economy, rural populations, persons with disabilities, women and children, migrants, refugees, and indigenous peoples. We are midway between the adoption of the Sustainable Development Agenda and the year 2030. If we are to achieve the targets set in 2015, we'll need to work collectively towards ensuring that national systems are built so that those who are further behind can be reached with timely, adequate, and comprehensive social protection. This will require broad commitment and buy-in from all actors to the notion that everyone must be able to access social protection when they need it. Achieving this will not only require enabling rights-based policy and legal frameworks, but also robust social information and delivery systems. Up-to-date, high-quality and disaggregated data are a prerequisite for effective policymaking and constitutes an area of great potential for further UN collaboration. Taking advantage of the multiple entry points with different ministries, UN agencies must join forces to help countries build strong and interoperable data systems for beneficiary identification, payment delivery, monitoring, and evaluation. There are already great examples of interagency collaboration to build on. They seek to strengthen implementation capacities throughout the social protection delivery chain, from outreach and registration to payment of benefits and case management of complaints and appeals, including through the use of digital solutions. Next slide, please. Further collaboration is also needed to support the extension of social protection to informal workers and their transition to the formal economy. These include self-employed workers, rural small-scale food producers and agricultural wage workers, care workers, who are predominantly female, and others who are excluded from both social assistance and social insurance. Supporting their formalization can not only give them access to social protection entitlements, but also help expand the financing base of the entire system. UN agencies can build on existing joint work to foster a better understanding of the characteristics of those in the informal economy and the types of barriers they face in accessing social protection. UN agencies could also explore together how to design and implement integrated approaches to support formalization and economic inclusion through, for example, a mix of social protection, skills development, public employment, childcare services, among other measures. The fourth area of convergence involves the financing of social protection, to which we have, the previous speakers have already referred. Social protection needs to be understood not as an expenditure, but an investment, one that bears high social and economic returns. It must be financed in ways that promote solidarity in the financing and allocation of benefits. Agencies can come together to carry out social expenditure reviews to assess current spending and identify financing gaps and financing options. Acting as one, UN agencies can explore ways to expand the fiscal space for social protection and find sources, both domestic and where needed international, that would close the considerable financing gaps and ensure at least basic social protection for all. Better coordination and joint work between UN agencies, IFIs, and bilateral partners can also increase synergies and promote greater alignment and coherence between ministries. Next slide, please. Strengthening the responsiveness of social protection systems and improving coordination between humanitarian and development interventions is another priority for UN collaboration. In a world of uncertainty punctuated by ever more frequent and severe weather shocks, conflict, public health and economic crises, and profound transformations in the world of work, UN agencies must come together to improve coordination in response to crises, ensure that humanitarian responses link up with and help build nascent or strengthen routine social protection systems, and improve the capacity of national social protection systems to anticipate, respond to, and recover from shocks. As COVID-19 has shown once again, sound, robust delivery systems are a key enabler of effective and timely responses to shocks. And the last key area of the what is about promoting stronger integration of universal social protection and universal health policies, bearing in mind that income security is one of the most important social determinants of health, that many social protection policies across the life cycle contribute in major ways to health and well-being, and that access to essential health care is a key part and one of the 4 guarantees of social protection floors. Coordinated action within the UN system will help strengthen the coordination and integration of universal social protection and universal health coverage policies. So these are the 6 priority areas for joint action outlined in the report. Now I will turn to Valerie to present the how. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alejandro and David. So this review of the first good morning and good afternoon, colleagues. It's really our pleasure to launch this report, which is a collaborative effort of the UN family of the past 1 year, and which really reviews these 13 years of UN collaboration. So my point will be more on identifying a number of areas for improvement on the how. So the first recommendation of this report is that UN agencies should make a better use of the body of human rights instruments on social protection that have been adopted by UN member states at the international level and are often ratified and applied in the national context. International social security standards such as ILO recommendation number 202 on social protection floors, which was adopted in 2012, are sometimes not sufficiently understood and known and used by the UN agencies when they provide policy advice to governments. So these instruments should really become part of the ABC of UN resident coordinators, UN country teams, and experts. And to increase this UN ownership of these instruments, more training obviously is needed, more awareness raising. And as David said, maybe these instruments should be also translated in more user-friendly terminology, maybe if there is an issue in understanding them. So the roadmaps developed as part of the Global Accelerator on Jobs and Social Protection, which is currently under development through a very important collaboration of the UN family. So these roadmaps that are on, for instance, social protection, on financing, on informality, should make systematic reference to the recommendation 202 and other instruments, and really also contribute to mainstreaming the principles of these standards across the UN system. Next slide. A second recommendation is that the UN agencies should build, of course, on existing structures of collaboration and really continue to promote a UN approach to social protection as part of the MAPS missions. MAPS stands for mainstreaming, accelerating, and policy support, as part of the UN Sustainable Development Cooperation frameworks, which is really about programming, during also the integrated national financing frameworks and also the development of joint technical cooperation projects. Instead of reinventing the wheel, the UN RCs and the UN country teams should also take stock of the efforts that have been deployed at the global level to harmonize policy approaches. So this includes, for instance, the 5 actions of the Global Partnership on Universal Social Protection, USP 2030, which can really be used to frame policy support to countries. This also includes the interagency assessment tools called ISPA that provide a common framework to assess social protection systems and to support policy design, operations, and financing of social protection systems. Next slide. As indicated by Elena already, and it's also clearly mentioned in the UN SDG report on our common agenda, the UN needs to increase its collaboration with other partners. So Elena has mentioned that the financing gaps for social protection are considerable, estimated at 15.9% of the GDP in low-income countries. And it's clear that budget support provided, for instance, by European Union delegations could complement national efforts to mobilize domestic resources for social protection and also to support national capacities to build not only administratively robust social protection systems, but also financially sustainable social protection institutions. Engaging with the IMF is key to secure what they call the social spending floor in times of austerity, but beyond that, also to advocate for continuous investments in social protection systems to accelerate recovery, address systemic issues such as informality, and to facilitate the transformations of the economy and society, such as the green transformation, the green transition that are needed today. Last but not least, UN country teams should systematically involve trade unions and employers' organizations together with civil society organizations in national dialogue on social protection to really build trust and to renew the social contract. So UN resident coordinators have a clear role to play. First, of course, to foster collaboration between agencies, as many of them do, including non-resident agencies, through assessments, joint programming, regular information sharing, organizing a UN task team on social protection, etc. Second, social protection needs to be part of the everyday vocabulary of UN resident coordinators, as Robert Piper and Elena has recalled that he explained this in our Inception report in July 2021. So that UN resident coordinators can really link social protection to also other policy issues of the country, such as food security, refugee crisis, green transition, etc. And they clearly have a role to play in raising the profile of social protection as a catalyzer for many other development objectives. And also we believe that the leadership role of the UNRCs can be enhanced if they manage to link the national agenda with the global agenda as an eye opener to UN colleagues and providing a bigger picture. This includes, for instance, linking the national agenda to the UNSG report on our common agenda, or linking the national discussions to the global accelerator, financing for development discussions, or even the preparation of the World Social Summit. Last but not least, so this will be the next slide, please. Last but not least, more efforts need to continue to really increase the capacities of the UN country teams and UNRCs in particular in the design, implementation, and financing of social protection. This can include very, very simple ideas such as the who is who list or a list of key publications from different agencies with the must read for UN country teams. This also includes intensifying capacity building, such as through the UN Staff College or ILO Turin Center, that are already providing online and courses for UNRCs and UN country teams. And in addition, the report claims that developing a common roadmap or a guidance note for UN resident coordinators and UN country teams and UN experts would be needed and very relevant. And the good news in that respect is that as part of the Global Accelerator, the work on the Global Accelerator, the UN colleagues involved are already developing a number of policy roadmaps that will help develop, shape this common knowledge. Thank you. Ned, over to you.
Thank you, David, Alejandro, and Valerie. By the way, there are 2 questions in the Q&A, so you may wish to address some of those in written responses. Actually, 3 now questions. And for all other colleagues, there is a link in the chat where you can access the whole report. So I would like to invite Lara Blanco, Deputy Director of the Sustainable Development Unit at the Executive Office of the UN Secretary General. Lara, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Nenad, and it's a pleasure to be to join you today in this important discussion. I'm also grateful for your support in accommodating also my participation, knowing that we had a couple of changes in the schedule on our side. So, well, I think there are a couple of things that have been said that I would want to highlight. In the first place, what Helena mentioned and several have also repeated there in the presentations. Indeed, social protection and the work that has been done and the work that you're reporting on today has a lot to do with the UN seeking to respond to crisis. And we had the 2008-2009 crisis, and here we are again with the crisis that the COVID-19 pandemic created, but now with overlapping crisis also resulting from the war in Ukraine. So last year, when all the efforts were put in the recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic, one of the things that the Secretary General and the Deputy Secretary General wanted to do was to make sure that, one, the UN did what it's supposed to do, which is protect and make sure that we gave responses not only to save lives, but also to save livelihoods. And secondly, we wanted also to find a way to build on the learning that had taken place during the period in terms of social protection. And I agree, it has been said here, many of the measures that we saw in the context of COVID-19 were fire engine measures, as one of the speakers said. But that impetus was one that we thought could be kept. And we thought also, and this is what was very much present in the call of the Secretary General and the Deputy Secretary General, that we needed to make sure that schemes were kept and that efforts were made to capitalize on innovation, for example, that happened using digital tools, and move towards more towards improved schemes. So that is one. And the second one, which we knew even before the COVID-19 crisis, is that we are lagging behind in terms of what we want on their Agenda 2030, and that we need to accelerate our efforts. So already working around issues of social protection would ensure that we have a linkage with a broader set of SDGs and create the kind of virtual cycle that would be needed for the achievement of the SDGs. And in this regard, let me just say that the Global Accelerator, the Global Accelerator is looking at social protection, but it is also looking at jobs. And the context or the environment in which it wants to act is specifically that of the transitions that are happening or that we need to make, especially in 3 areas. One, the transition towards a care economy that we very much understood the need for in the context of COVID. Secondly, the green transition, very much linked with the climate emergency, but also with the energy transitions that countries need to make. And thirdly, the digital transition that that was happening, but that also accelerated in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, with the war in Ukraine, again, we are seeing the need to make sure that people are protected, and perhaps we need to find ways in which we can increase the volume of the call for ensuring that social protection is there, and that again finance is made available for this call. Maybe the other point that I want to make, I think it has been said, but it is very important. The Secretary General launched the policy brief and the Global Accelerator in September 2021, but there is a resemblance between what we have as recommendations under the policy brief and those recommendations are around jobs and social protection that are included in the report on our common agenda. So that means that the grounds, the enabling environment for success have been created, and we have been encouraged lately after the consultations that were convened by the President of the General Assembly around the Common Agenda report, where we heard from member states and from stakeholders and actors that participated a great consensus around the recommendations and the objectives that were set in the policy brief and in the report. Yet, I think that some of the issues that we need to solve and unpack as we move towards full implementation of the Global Accelerator have been mentioned here. I think that the most important is that we really need to make sure that we use the work that has been done by the agencies that prepared the report and by all the work that has been done, the interagency work that has been done on social protection. We need to use all of that now to make sure that we have a real common understanding about what is it that we mean, what are the aspirations, and how we should move forward to ensure that that we achieve what we want. So there's a conceptual piece that we still need to work on, and there's also a practical piece that we also need to look at. Indeed, I would say that the report and what I've heard here and what I have seen provides a good guide to how to do that and what is it that we need to double check for, from common language to methods to ensuring that we have proper disaggregations or that we look at issues of territoriality and so on. So it is quite timely. As we speak under the leadership of the ILO, but also with participation with a number of lead agencies, many of which are here, there has been, the Secretary General has requested an interagency task team to look at the recommendations, unpack them, and prepare a roadmap moving into 2030 with tangible outcomes also at the country level. Most importantly, we do need to work on the finance leg. It is one of the areas that the Secretary General has been calling on. We need to make sure that we have the investment flows, that we have the liquidity, that countries have the political will to mobilize also domestic resources to make sure that we ensure that we are able to expand social protection to the 4 billion people that still do not have any kind of social protection, and to create the 400 million jobs plus, I would say, because we have been revising that figure, that is expected to come out from the effort of the accelerator. So this political will, this mobilization is going to be supported or also promoted and expanded through a high ambition coalition of member states that the Secretary General is going to convene, and that we're still in the process of shaping and understanding how it is going to work. So just to finish, I want to say that the Secretary General and the DSG now have put the Global Accelerator as a centerpiece of UN's work in the context of the Decade of Action for the delivery of the SDGs, and that in our highly uncertain world, universal social protection indeed can no longer be a privilege, but we need to make sure that it reaches all the population and all the countries. DSG insists that while we are going to start with pathfinder countries, this is a universal agenda of the North and the South, and that we need to make sure that through the Global Accelerator, we work with all countries to achieve what we want by 2030. And this has to be grounded, of course, on the notion of social protection floors, as you have said, and as we said as well in the policy brief, and on ILO recommendation to give solid ground to achieve the goals foreseen. So congratulations on the paper. Thank you for the presentation, and I'm looking forward to the comments from other colleagues that I'm sure will keep us in the right direction again. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Lara, for thoughtful and comprehensive remarks. I would just like to mention that the link to access the paper is in the chat. And also for David, Valerie, Alejandro, maybe Veronica, there are 7 questions in the Q&A. Maybe some of those could be responded to in written form, and then the rest at the very end. Thank you very much. So we are now going to have an exciting round table moderated by Natalia Vinder Rossi, Associate Director of Social Policy and Social Protection at UNICEF. Natalia, over to you.
Thank you very much, Nenad. Good morning, good afternoon, colleagues, and a warm welcome once again. Very excited to be here today and to have the opportunity to chair this critical roundtable discussion. I think, as discussed in the previous sessions, we are in a very critical moment, and this is precisely, I think, the time where we need to further and revamp our collective efforts around universal social protection and accelerate progress across SDGs. And I think we're on the right track. But we now have the opportunity to hear from for critical stakeholders and partners on the findings of our report, the call for action, and of course, priorities moving forward. So in the interest of time, let me start by introducing the panel, and then we'll start with the discussion. So we have today Ms. Sara Sekenes, UN Resident Coordinator in Laos, Monsieur Mamadou Diallo, IETUC Deputy General Secretary, Ms. Gabriela Rigg-Herzog, United States Council for International Business, Mr. Kennedy Mumba, Director of Social Welfare, Ministry of Community Development and Social Services in Zambia, and Mr. Mauricio Soto, Deputy Division Chief in the Expenditure Policy Division of the Fiscal Affairs Department in IMF. Well, welcome, and thank you for being here today. So I'll start asking one question to each of the panelists, and you will have around 2 or 3 minutes to address, and then I'll check the time to see we have time for 4 more. And of course, for the audience, please continue to pose your questions to the panelists in the Q&A. So Sarah, if I can start with you. I think it will be great to hear from your perspective from an RC office. What is your opinion on this effort on jointly reflecting on successes, failures, and ways to improve UN agency collaboration in the area of social protection? What do you think is the added value of this exercise, and of course things that we can do better? Sarah, over to you.
Thank you very much, Natalia. And first of all, let me thank you for the invitation. And on behalf of the Lao country team, we really welcome this opportunity and wish to congratulate all involved in this launch for a truly joint effort. And in fact, answering to your question on the value added of this effort, I will echo some of the points already made, which is of course good because that shows that it's aligned very much with the findings of the report. And as has been emphasized, social protection cuts across the mandates of many different parts of the UN. So it is very welcome and timely to see efforts to think strategically about how different parts of the system can work more effectively together. It is worth making a moment to appreciate why we see value in collaboration, especially as collaboration between agencies and joint programs and joint programming still has some way to go before it becomes the default way of thinking and working, as pointed out by David in the accomplishments and limitations of porcupines. So indeed, I recognize many of these accomplishments and limitations. Within a UN country team, each agency, fund, and program can and should bring different specialized expertise, capacities, and partnerships to joint efforts. And with appropriate consideration of how these can be effectively and efficiently combined, we can realize a whole that is greater than the simple sum of our parts, as referred to by many already. For example, in Lao, we've brought together specific areas of expertise, ILO on social protection policy, UNCDF on financing, and importantly, systems and modalities for how to realize this, and UNICEF on strengthening government capacity and systems to deliver coordinated needs-based cash transfers to targeted beneficiaries specifically, to deliver coordinated support to the government through joint activities, training, and research. And we have, in fact, one of the joint programs under the SDG fund for social protection. UN agencies, funds, and programs working together have contributed to the adoption of a national strategy on social protection, encompassing many of the UN principles, including universal access to social protection. As is the case in many countries, we face an extremely challenging financial environment. And this was true also before the pandemic. And now with further price hikes on fuel, food, and fertilizers, this will no doubt become even more accentuated. Building on nationally owned and financed inclusive social protection systems will therefore require a long-term perspective and goal, with need for realism of what can be possible in the short term, whilst emphasizing the absolute criticality on pursuing all tracks. Whilst current efforts to implement social welfare programs, and in our case with the support of both the UN and the World Bank, have focused on pilots to test and demonstrate the viability of different systems, we need also to ensure clear plans for how learning from these are taken forward in the practical examples at country level, and how we can support countries to take these efforts to scale. And in this context, it's also important to link social protection efforts to broader engagement on financing for development, also mentioned by several already, including discussions related to the government's revenue, taxation, and debt management, especially supported to the development of integrated national financing frameworks. So social protection was, of course, as we know, one of the first areas of the focus for enhanced collaboration within the UN, and very much reflected in the first call of the SDG Joint Fund, which reflected social protection specifically. And as we in Laos approach the end of our 2+ years of joint programming under this window, we look forward to new initiatives, such as, again, those mentioned on the Global Accelerator on Jobs and Social Protection for Just Transitions. We also now appreciate more clearly that social protection cannot work alone. It must be designed hand in hand with other social and economic policies. And in that vein, the Secretary General's initiative on the Global Accelerator will be important for developing integrated policy responses across social protection, employment, and environmental policies on the basis of sustainable and equitable financing. I think I'll stop there and listen to more input from the panel, and I'll be happy to come on additional questions.
Thank you so much, Sarah, and congrats for the milestone on the national strategy, but also for highlighting the very important challenges that now the country has ahead, and the importance that you saw around, bringing the different expertise together precisely to identify and find the balance between the comprehensive approach, but also the very specific steps towards a sustainable system. So thanks for those critical remarks. Mr. Mumba, if I can go to you next. Could you please give us the main highlights of the development of the social protection system in Zambia over the past maybe 10 or 12 years? What has worked, what didn't, and what was the role of the UN in supporting these critical changes? Mr. Mumba, over to you.
Thank you very much, and also just to echo my colleagues, and also thank everyone and the organizers for this wonderful interaction that we are having. Yes, indeed, Zambia is one of the key social protection players. We have been implementing the program since 2003, emerging from a caseload of 169 households to the current 973,000 households. That's a big milestone, and a lot has happened. I think we have navigated through in terms of systems development, which has been very, very critical. And I think what has also been very, very critical is that we have tried to invest particularly in communication. This has helped us to make stakeholders and the beneficiaries we are serving understand what social protection and social cash transfer in particular has been, who should be targeted and who should not be targeted. This has been able to accelerate the work that we have. And around it also, we have been able to generate the needed evidence. So there have been a lot of impact evaluations that have taken place over time with very good lessons. Initially, we began from different pilots, and we needed to harmonize our targeting approach and categories as a country, which we successfully did later the years, and that was through evidence generation. So what has also happened with us is that you've been able to scale up the program, from one district in 2003 to all the districts countrywide. We have 116 districts in Zambia. And the program has also increased in terms of scale and scope. And we have been able to manage all these transitioning processes. Also, midway has also been the digitalization of our systems, from the management information systems, where initially we had the manual approach. We started the non-web-based digital system to now what we call the Zambia Integrated Social Protection Management Information System, in brief, ZISPIS, which has different modules: payments, grievance mechanisms, targeting, enumeration, monitoring, and evaluation. They have been incorporated in this system, which as a country we are now utilizing. And over there, again, what has happened is that based on our experiences in implementation, we have been able to challenge ourselves in terms of how we do the work, how we do the job, and the impact that has been having. Initially, we are coming from the conception that we cannot have some beneficiaries benefiting from more than one social protection program, which we are calling it double dipping. But we are able to challenge ourselves to say that's not double dipping. Actually, that is an integrated way of managing and also accelerating progress insofar as poverty alleviation is concerned. So this is where we're coming from. And now we have a very strong cash plus agenda for the country. So all the work that we have done as a country, I think it will be unfair for Zambia not to register the significant role which the UN system has played. It's helping the country to build the capacity, helping the country to help us in the evidence generation, where we had inadequacies in terms of capacities as a country, the UN system has come forth to help us bring experts outside Zambia, all over the globe. And we have also seen where we have also been helped a lot to also understand what is happening outside the country. You know, the South to South learning has been very, very critical for the country, because we have learned valuable lessons that we have endeavored to incorporate into our programming as a country. So in a nutshell, we have developed effective systems, collaborative mechanisms, networks. We have been able to scale up the program, reaching out to so many households, alleviating poverty. You visit these households, they've got a story to tell. They've got a smile on their mouth, and you'll be pleased to see how these little efforts have really transformed our lives. So in terms of Zambia, I think this is the trajectory that we have taken place. So right now, we are in the process of digitalizing payments, where we have incorporated what we call electronic payment service providers. These are banks and mobile operators who will be delivering the payments to the beneficiaries, and we are piloting it in 2 districts. We did the first pilot for the January-February disbursements, and we are now waiting to do the March-April disbursement. After that, we'll go to our treasury to give us the authorization now to begin the scale up. So far, the experiences has been very good. Beneficiaries have gotten the money, they are very happy. We have cut off those middlemen who are the paypoint managers to deliver this cash to them, you know, reducing that human interface between the systems and the beneficiaries. Also, critically, adding financial literacy and financial inclusion amongst beneficiaries, because with these mobile operators, they are able to open those mobile money accounts, bank accounts, understanding the concept of saving, understanding the concept of how the banking system and mobile money system works. So let me also end there, and come back if there are any further questions. Thank you very much.
Many thanks, Mr. Mumba. And if I may say, from a personal perspective, having followed the work of the government of Zambia throughout the years, is really impressive to see the commitment in terms of coverage, in terms of systems building, in terms of evidence generation, and how much the country has been able to achieve. And as you said, with the focus on trying to alleviate poverty, but also leveraging the different expertise across sectors, it's really impressive. Look forward to continue seeing Zambia as one of the champions as we work towards universal social protection. So thank you very much for that. If I can go now to Mr. Diallo, it will be great if we can share with us your views on the findings on the report, and also trades unions' views more broadly on the extension of social protection and the role of the UN system. Mr. Diallo, over to you. I don't know if he's online. If not, we can go to the next speaker. Okay, let's go to maybe.
Okay.
Oh, there you are. There you are.
Yes, I'm here.
Apologies. Okay,
I was
please go ahead.
muted. Sorry for that.
Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Madam. I'm very pleased to join you today, of course, and to reflect on the review paper outlining the process of the UN Cooperation on Social Protection. And I think it's also important to appreciate all the effort and achievement of the past years, but also to reflect on the future steps to undertake for enhancing social protection systems globally. We believe that now more than ever, international support and cooperation are essential. First, because it can help us tackle the global challenges arising from the climate emergency, the economic and social impact of the rapidly changing world of work, the consequences of the COVID-19 raised by many of friends who took the floor before me, but also the global impacts of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. To achieve the UN Sustainable Development Goal 1.3, which commits to implement social protection system for all, including flaws, is the second, I think, important issue we need to take into account. This is why in this very critical time, universal social protection systems can rebuild economies and be the foundation of resilience for people in need. It is an integral part of our demand for a new social contract. And trade unions are strongly committed to ensuring universal social protection systems that reduce poverty, inequality, and social exclusion. We are also actively involved in national and international debates for the elaboration of extension of social protection system, not least with UN agencies. We have heard many comments today, and we welcome the development of the One UN approach, establishing a common understanding and the key principle for social protection across many agencies with different mandates and priorities, and its foundation in the right basic perspective, certainly a strong basis to ensure universality of social protection on one great element for coherence across the UN system. However, despite the fact that social protection is internationally recognized human right, the world is still lagging behind in social protection coverage. Overall, of the world population is still not covered from the social protection, mainly if we take into account the informal economy workers who represent today on average 60% of the workforce in the world. Through our research, we have also seen that international financial support to social protection in developing countries is often allocated toward temporary, targeted, and or fragmented cash transfer and social programs, rather than fostering the extension of statutory right-based social protection system. This needs to be addressed. We believe that the Global Social Protection Fund can serve to give opportunity to billions of people to access decent life. It could effectively build on existing coordination mechanism and institution at the national and global level, and have key UN bodies involved in providing technical advice to recipients countries. To conclude, Madam, we believe that the Global Social Protection and Fund would be a fundamental step to meet the ambition set out by the UN Secretary General in the Global Accelerator for Jobs and Social Protection, as well as help us ensure an economic recovery and provide adequate social protection for all. We also believe that investing in social protection is not a loss, but a profit. By investing in social protection and overall on incomes and decent living, working, and living conditions, we ensure both the sustainability of the economy and the survival of humanity. I thank you, Madam.
Thank you very much, Mr. Diallo, for bringing to the panel your very unique perspective and highlighting the importance of social protection as a core pillar of the social contract, which I think we need to continue strengthening. And of course, for highlighting once again the very specific challenge we all face as a collective around really expanding coverage for the informal workers. And that was, as you've seen, one of the core priorities that we've identified that as one UN, we need to work together to really close that gap. So thank you very much for those remarks. If I can go now to Ms. Rick Herzog, I would like to hear your thoughts on the areas of works and recommendations for future collaboration as identified in the publications. From your perspective, are there any issues that we're missing or that were not sufficiently highlighted, areas that we think we still need to put our joint attention as UN? Ms. Gabriela, over to you.
Thank you so much. And let me join with my colleagues in thanking the organizers. It's an honor to be included. I want to commend you as well on your important paper that you've released. And I think it's a wonderful reflection and an aspirational reflection for all of us on the important issue of collaboration. So many different UN agencies coming together and overcoming and managing, as David has so thoughtfully highlighted, our own porcupine tendencies. So congratulations to all of you. We all have a responsibility to work towards the shared objective of realizing universal social protection. As Helena noted in her introduction, the pandemic has harshly illuminated many gaps in social protection coverage around the world. And there's no doubt that much more needs to be done to close these gaps. As we put social protection at the forefront of our policy agendas, we must keep a number of key elements in mind, including the need to craft sustainable social protection systems that are tailored to each country context and that take into account companion goals of national economic growth and fiscal policy management. Policy coherence is critical to build towards long-term solutions. The design and implementation of social protection schemes is only possible in coordination with other policies, in particular, employment policies, and recognizing and taking into account elements that put pressure on the social security systems. Important issues that have been identified in the paper, such as population aging, youth unemployment, and informality. On this topic of informality, I was especially glad to see it highlighted in the paper as well, as Mr. Diallo has noted. Informality, according to the ILO, it makes up nearly 2/3 of global workforce. It's over 61% on average globally, and in some parts of the world, and in some countries, 80, 90%. This is an important area of needed policy coherence, because if we simply extend safety nets without an effective framework for active labor market policies, we would risk an unsustainable outcome. From an employer perspective, sound fiscal policy measures, economic development, and enabling frameworks are critical for decent job creation. Cooperation is needed more than ever at all levels, and this is where the UN engagement and collaboration to achieve universal access to comprehensive and sustainable social protection remains key. We need to step up technical cooperation and capacity building, both strengthen domestic resource mobilization and for the development of effective systems, in particular in countries with the biggest gaps in social protection. However, in addition to specific technical assistance in this matter, some countries most clearly will need added further financial support to strengthen their ability to develop and deliver adequate and sustainable social protection systems. In this context, international financial assistance and solidarity, along with strengthened coordination among all actors, inclusive of the international financial institutions, is needed to improve policy coherence and avoid duplication. Well-designed joint initiatives to mobilize international financial resources can at the same time strengthen domestic resource mobilization. Your question in terms of what might be missing from the paper, well, there were a couple references acknowledging relevance of engaging business and business federations. We regrettably don't see tangible examples or strategies for other UN agencies beyond the ILO to further engage with the private sector. We would urge taking a fresh look at that approach. We would point readers especially to item 4 on page 20 of the report, the item called The Way Forward. It refers to the idea of improving UN meaningful outreach and collaboration with other key actors like business and business federations. The paper indeed does an excellent job of explaining the what, as Alejandro walked us through. And for the how, please include engagement with business and business federations. We're pleased to see that resident coordinators have begun this outreach and opened this door. And we believe engagement should be stronger and sustained in this regard. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gabriela. I think I found particularly important your focus on how much collaboration is important but not easy, and the role that every single actor has in this domain, including business federations and businesses. I think we do have definitely more space to engage business federations in this joint and collective objective, and look forward to partnering with you and the team to move this agenda to reach the level of ambition that we all trying to reach. So thank you very much for those perspectives. And also for linking to my next speaker around the work with IFIs. So if I can invite Mauricio Soto from the IMF to also share his perspective. So Mauricio, we know that in light of the key challenges that countries are facing in closing financing gaps, one of the key recommendations of this publication is for the UN to really continue and further engage with other development actors, in particular IFIs and of course the IMF, and that this collaboration needs to continue, but also to be maybe more systematic. And there's, I think, already many efforts underway in this regard, in the context of the work that many of us are doing in terms of social spending frameworks, in the context of the IMFs. But I think it will be great to hear your perspectives on how we can work best towards a more systematic coordination between the UN agencies and the IMF, really to ensure alignment in our policy objectives and financial and financing priorities. And if you can maybe discuss some of country examples where you've seen that this has worked. So over to you, Mauricio.
Thank you very much, and thanks for the invitation. It's really an honor to be part of this panel. And I really want to, appreciate my gratitude to David, Alejandro, and Valerie and their teams for a wonderful report that is really going to set up principles and ideas for future collaboration that is well needed across our institutions. So I'm really thankful, and I hope that everybody has time to read the report. So let me maybe start to answer your question by telling you what the IMF can bring to the table. So from our perspective, scaling up spending in social protection is critical. So we understand that social protection can help countries achieve resilient and inclusive recoveries. And from our perspective, it supports macroeconomic stability. What are the unique things that we can bring to the table from our side? First is the analysis. We apply macroeconomic analysis to ensure that social spending supports macroeconomic stability, inclusive growth, and as some of our speakers have mentioned, I think Gabriela highlighted this, that social protection spending is sustainable. Second, we look to build up social protection. So we look at social spending as a vital part, or as we will call it, macro-critical. We include it in our dialogue with countries, including our lending activities. In recent years, many of our programs include targets to protect and expand social spending. And I could think of maybe two examples. Madagascar and Ecuador have specific conditions to increase the number of beneficiaries of social protection schemes. And maybe the third point of things that I think we can bring that are unique from the IMF that we can bring to the table is really what I would say continue. That is, social spending needs to be maintained and sustained. We emphasize, because of this, the importance of securing social spending within sustainable medium-term fiscal frameworks. Now, let me close by saying that we recognize that to be effective, we at the IMF must work together with your unique strengths as organizations. At the end of the day, we can only be effective and we can be most useful to our country members by complementing our work at the country level. So I am glad that the report highlights collaboration between ILO, UNICEF, and IMF in several countries. And this has been done in the recent years in the context of Article 4 consultations. Our teams have been working very well in different countries, including Iraq, Mozambique, which is mentioned in the report, Togo, and Uzbekistan. Let me close by saying that our organizations together can think creatively and act boldly to protect the most vulnerable, and hopefully help countries build a greener, more resilient, and inclusive world. Let me close there, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mauricio. And really, I think the story of your remarks shows the alignment of our collective objectives, that we really, both IMF and the UN recognize the need to really the importance of scaling up investments in social protection and the importance that social protection has for overall economic wealth and economic stability. And also the fact that we're already working, and there are examples that we can draw in on where the UN and IMF have been working together precisely to make that joint case. So let's scale up those efforts and continue to work in that direction. I wish we had more time, because this has been one of a rich panel and really a unique perspective from different points of view, which I think we need to continue and do more and have more time and spaces to bring different partners together. But unfortunately, we're running out of time, so we're going to close this panel here. I really want to give my sincerest appreciation to Shara, Kennedy, Mamadou, Gabriela, Mauricio for the very unique, frank, transparent, and constructive insights. I think that it's very encouraging to see that there's alignment, that there's support to the priorities that as UN were put forth. And we look forward to continue working together with all of you and with the constituencies that you represent to make sure that we really can realize our collective objectives around universal social protection for all. Thank you very much. And now over to Nenad. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Natalia. Thank you very much, participants at the roundtable. Indeed, the discussion was very comprehensive, and I suppose we could have continued for several hours. Unfortunately, we will not have the time for Q&A, but do note that there are some responses to questions you posted in the Zoom Q&A, and actually one question has, I think, 2 or 3 responses. So let's continue this conversation, this very critical conversation, in other fora. But now I would like to invite Shara Rasavi, Director of Social Protection Department at ILO, to close the event. Shara, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your amazing chairing. And I will close, and I will be brief to make it easy for people to make it to the next meeting. So just allow me to highlight really 3 points that I think came out, not by way of a summary of what people said, but really sort of what I think I heard. So first, a few points about the kind of uniqueness of this moment that we're in. You know, sometimes we say we're at a critical juncture, we're at a crossroads, but there is something quite unique about this moment. And I think all of you said very clearly how the COVID pandemic has really elevated the recognition of the crucial importance of social protection and opened this, you know, what we call the policy window, which may not stay open for very long. So it's important that we seize that window. But that's certainly the case. But this, I think, recognition has also come, as you said, with this kind of view of
the risk of seeing social protection as something that really comes in during a crisis. It's a bit of an emergency response, a fire engine, as David referred to it, rather than really something that is more kind of a life cycle, right, and something which is indispensable on a day-to-day basis. So I think we need to really be able to seize that opening and moment by really also underlining the importance of social protection, even outside moments of crisis and emergency. And I think also, again, another tension that we have is that today, we see there's much greater recognition and awareness of the usefulness of social protection by governments, which, many, thanks to sort of, to the moment of the crisis with the pandemic, which really made that clear, but also, workers' organizations as well as employers' organizations, who also saw its importance for, business continuity as well, and for the general public. But still, this kind of greater recognition and visibility of the value of social protection comes with this moment that we're in of, the worries about the fiscal retrenchment that is going to come, which is on the horizon. And we know that austerity is not very friendly to building universal social protection systems. So that's another kind of thing that the moment has put upon us and we need to keep in mind. And the job ahead, of course, is huge. I don't need to recite the numbers. We all know it, 4 billion people with no social protection, inadequate protection even where it exists, not comprehensive, huge financing gaps. I don't need to reiterate that. But just to say, all of that means that the job, the work ahead is huge, and the need really for joined up action and joined up technical advice that helps our countries rather than, each agency coming in with its own sort of separate, different advice is absolutely key. So this takes me to my second point very briefly, which is really a few words about the significance of the joint paper that our agencies have produced, and I think we can see it as something to be really proud of. I think being joined up and providing consistent technical advice, has to have a stronger foundation than just relying on the really good UNRCs, which I know can play a really important role, or really good agency staff. We know individuals matter, but we also know that individuals are not sufficient for sort of sustained lasting change. And for that, we really need a stronger foundation. And I think this paper really does an important job of giving us that important sort of foundation of creating that common roadmap anchored in our common human rights principles, principles of human rights, of international labor standards that really emphasize the importance of universality of coverage, which goes beyond specific vulnerable groups, comprehensiveness of social protection systems that goes beyond the ad hoc program or single scheme, the importance of adequacy, which goes beyond the floor level and brings in the sort of vertical dimensions, and the adequacy and sustainability, and we heard our IMF colleague, the sustainability of the financing, but also financing that is based on principles of solidarity and equity and burden sharing that does not overburden those with little means, and meaningful participation and voice and accountability. And this takes me really, having said how great the paper was, let me just say also the third and last point, which is really about the challenges ahead. I mean, the Global Accelerator really puts a big challenge, I think, ahead of us, which is the challenge of policy integration. It means social protection working in close integration with employment policies, with social policies, including universal health policies, as well as care policies, as well as environmental policies. So really bringing in that policy integration, which I think pushes us a little bit beyond our comfort zones, but this is where we're at. And I think the accelerator really demands that we lift ourselves up and really engage in that important work of policy integration. And also not to forget the importance of macroeconomic policies, fiscal policies, monetary policies. And these are really needed to be enabling and to allowing support for universal social protection systems, engaging with interlocutors that maybe we don't always engage with, ministries of finance, with the international financial institutions that I think still need to be convinced that investing in universal social protection, as opposed to just temporary safety nets that are targeting the very poor, we're talking about building systems, universal systems. I think we still need, we have a little way to go to convince them that this is the way to go. especially in a climate of austerity, with heightened uncertainty, a monetary policy tightening in advanced economies, which can really negatively impact financial flows to developing countries, which are really already reeling from high levels of debt and limited fiscal space. So this is a little bit the difficult, I think, moments ahead. But let me end on a positive note, and the timing of this paper could not have been better. It's an initial milestone for us as the ILO, and I hope for the UN system, to celebrate the 10th anniversary of the Social Protection Floor's recommendation. Also a very strong basis for drafting the roadmap on social protection that's going to go into the Global Accelerator. We're working on that now with all of our sister agencies here. And a real touchstone, a reference point, a guide, I don't know what we want to say, how we want to call it, for the one UN work that has to happen at the national level in the Pathfinder countries, which will hopefully start now as we move ahead with the implementation of the Global Accelerator. So thank you all for the great work you have done, and I hope that you have a lovely rest of day. Goodbye.